Good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon as we try and figure out the future for smarter buildings and the technology that goes in them. It's really good to have you with us today. In case you're wondering who we are, our profiles are listed on mondaylive.org, so head over there. And just remember that views expressed here are personal and not of any company or organization. Just sort of bear that in mind. That enables us to be much more sort of open in terms of how we all talk about the issues that matter. Let's make the Zoom chat active again to make this a good interactive conversation. And if you want anything on the slide deck, it's also available on mondaylive.org. This being December, the last month of the year, we've had a really busy year, and we're sort of wrapping up the year by decomposing our thinking. This is following some couple of months of really sort of interesting insights into decomposing systems and technologies. So really excited about that. Our agenda, news and trends to begin with, and then we'll talk about the decomposing sort of theme. What we want to do today is really sort of decompose and recompose the HVAC industry. I don't think we'll be able to do the actual decomposing and recomposing in an hour, but we want to just talk through what that means in our heads as a sort of thought experiment. So looking forward to that. But before that, as always, hand it over to Ken. What's going on, Ken?
Thanks, Anto. Lots. Up in the corner left-hand of the slide is a picture, and I kind of like that. I'm a very visual person, and we're kind of anticipating that like we're the only people that are in the middle of this digital blizzard, and it's very clouded, and that's not true. The whole platforms that we're working on are changing as well. And I think this graphic does an amazing job of just showing us exactly where we are. And we're exactly right there in the middle, in midair, trying to move from one technology to another. And I think if you take that particular graphic and you substitute the traditional building and basically put the 6G as the building we're trying to get to, you can actually see that we're all in midair engineering. So I think that's a great graphic. The other thing, I'm not sure where you guys are at, but I'm still trying to unravel all of the capabilities of 5G, and now 6G is up and running in Japan. So we need to see what that is. And I also have been posting some stuff that suggests there's within 6G that's starting to cross over boundaries that are beyond hardware and into philosophy and governance and all kinds of things like that. So that's pretty interesting. Okay, back and underneath that is our summary of last Monday's, I always say last Monday's Zoom. The superglue silos to interoperable bricks, decomposing for a smarter building future. That was a great summary, and it was basically well received. And the thing that was most impressive is it also got picked up by the IT folks, and it ended up in some of their blogs and got some great reads. So I think the twist there is as we stop talking about VAV boxes, which only we know about, and we start to have more generalized subtitles, I think we cross the floor and we start to enter into the IT world, which is interesting for sure. I'll just maybe keep going across there because the BACnet one got popped in on top because it was a late comer. We didn't get that together until later last week. And this is a session that two of our members did, Tracy and Jim Lee, on BACnet. And I took a look at it and I learned lots. I think everybody is the same, but the other thing is we were able to get it out quickly and get it. We didn't have a lot of time to present it. We got it out within the same day actually, and we were able to get some folks joined. And I think that's a message. That's a something that you can use automated buildings for. It's a quick platform to get your information. How do I get my message out right now? And this is the answer. The other thing that was amazing is that was extremely well read, and it links to the actual sessions that Tracy and Jim put on, and the global twist on BACnet, and just how big the BACnet, everybody that touches BACnet is, it was worked out really well. Okay, back to the left-hand side again. Uh, that came from one of the other ones where one of our other Zooms where uh, yeah. Anyway, we basically were talking about that. And I think this does a great job of explaining the castles to bricks and goes through all the pieces and helps us understand the Lego block analogy. And it was actually uh, missing my words here. I'll just go on. And we go over to the other graphic there, which is showing what we were pushing together there with Kimon. Kimon did the presentation, and he's got a lot of content on our site about this whole concept of the building blocks and how we went into the building in Oregon there and basically made it a lot better, recomposing and stuff. The one down at the bottom corner, go back over left-hand side, bottom corner, is Joseph got talking, and this was a new concept to me, is a deconglomeration of the industry and the OEMs. Interesting that we went through this period where the big companies bought the little companies, mostly just to immobilize them. And now I think they clearly understand that they can't immobilize them. And so in some ways, it appears to me that they're releasing them back out into the wild. And I think that's a good thing, but it also, I think, adds strength to our theme of decomposing and recomposing. So I think they've gone from conglomeration to deconglomeration. Probably have trouble with that word. Anyway, that's it. On the other side, are posing all of our AHR Expo, and there's the old sketchy guy is one of the featured speakers, and then we've got our BACnet to the future, which again involves Jim and Tracy and Rick and Andy, all contributing editors of Automated Buildings. So we're kind of getting to see a theme there this is the platform for a lot of the folks. And then there was a great post by Steve Dodds, just trying to get some people into our industry. I jumped in and supported that, and a whole bunch of people did, and it's getting good spin on the on LinkedIn. Sorry, and
Cool.
yeah, I think that's it. Back to you.
Cool. It's an awful lot of stuff. And I agree. Um, Moving on to Rick. What's going on, Rick?
Well, the theme is going to be all about getting ready for AHR and gosh, we should have graphics for what our booth is going to be, and we should be talking about the yellow brick road to Las Vegas. That maybe will be the graphic once, maybe next week or as we go forward.
It's the yellow block road, by the way.
Yellow block road.
You got to look at Anto's graphic.
Well, that's actually a pretty good way to put it. The yellow block road. And so C4SB will have a presence in the lawn, formerly lawn booth, but it's currently going to be co-branded lawn and C4SB. There'll be a booth on the trade show floor at AHR. And as we talked about last week, be a series of presentations that'll happen at that booth, and we're working on the list of what those presentations are. And they will be basically following along this list of what the working groups are. So each working group or somebody from each working group will have the opportunity to present what's happening in their working group. And let's see, BACnet Cloud Collective is on there. Yes. One of the ones that'll be exciting to be able to talk about more detail on will be, and before then even, will be the BACnet Cloud Collective. And I think what Ken was highlighting on the last page and the update that was on automated buildings about what's what what the future of BACnet is in the cloud and how that's going to be a combination of a working group with with C4SB. I think is pretty exciting indication of the really important work that is happening with these different working groups. So that, and we'll have more news on what's happening with Lawnmark and what's happening with the Asset Leadership Network standard. We'll have updates from almost every one of these working groups, at least so far it looks that way. So stay tuned for more Yellow Block Road news.
Thank you, Rick. So, Kimon, can you do a brief report on the events you went to late last week?
Yeah, I just came back yesterday, actually. I was in San Diego at the Neural Information Processing Systems Conference, which I didn't know what to expect. I was invited by Judah Goldfeder, who I met at the ASHRAE conference, who's with Google and Columbia University, and he invited me to present there. It's a massive conference. If any of you have been there, maybe some of you have, but it's 22,000 people. I've never seen anything like this. You walk into the conference floor, it's filled with the Googles and the Amazons and the Metas and the Teslas and Wells Fargo and just kind of a range of large booths, all recruiting people to work for them from the AI world. The next part of the conference was this massive poster session that was about, I don't know, 15 rows of 50 posters each. So it's like 800 posters with PhDs and students presenting their AI, their neural processing system work. And it's packed with people, a lot of universities from around the world, a lot from China, and where AI is pretty heavy, and they're just three or four back-to-back sessions, 2 or 3 hours each, times 800 posters each. So you can just imagine the activity there. I'll be posting more about this. I presented with Judah's group on the Urban AI conference within that conference. It was a whole day session on AI, and maybe the main takeaway that I've seen, and I kind of knew this, there's a lot of AI work being done around buildings and facilities and energy and everything, and they're creating synthetic data because the actual data is not out there. In other words, the buildings are silent, like we all know. So I presented that plus the PAE work, and when I showed the PAE work, I said, well, here's a building that we're starting to see signals from. So I think there's an opportunity there to connect the dots. Then there was also the San Diego Tech Conference, a whole separate conference within San Diego, focused on smart cities, AI, robotics, finance, healthcare, kind of a range of kind of engineering type topics. Anyway, I'll be writing on automated buildings about this, and I have a lot of photos and material that will be shared.
Cool. It sounds very exciting. Thank you. Thank you for the update, Kimon. Anybody else with anything else?
I got something.
Go ahead.
So I'm sure most of you might have heard about AECOM's acquisition of Consigli for $390 million in the AEC space. They had this product called the Autonomous Engineer. It was an AI-driven engineer that put together some sort of AEC work, MVP stuff. But basically, they came out. Everybody's trying to figure out what sense it makes that they would buy this AI startup for like 49x. It's 5 million in revenue a year. And yeah, I think what a big thing that's driving that is innovative solutions that are not, the GPU thing is kind of like unsustainable, right? I mean, we everybody knows that, so everybody's trying to figure out where that's going to go. I had a fascinating conversation with a gentleman named Mark Krasinski over the weekend on LinkedIn, off of LinkedIn. And he said, he made a notable quote. He said, AI's future won't be determined by how many GPUs we're able to stack, but by the innovative AI technology that makes these GPUs unnecessary. And I thought that was pretty compelling.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you, Keith. Anything else, anyone?
I've seen an awful lot of articles about semantics and stuff that everybody's sort of coming to the same conclusion we came to a year or two ago, that naming and finding this stuff is job number one. And so I think we're on the right track there.
Yeah. Oh, one quick thing, Anto. I forgot to mention that Jack Dangermond actually presented at this session too remotely. He recorded a session. It was triggered by the post that we did on automated buildings with Jack a few months back, and the Google Judah was very interested in what Jack presented. So there's this interest in location mapping. Obviously, when you start getting into large scale, then it's location based information. So he presented as well too.
All right, so let's dive in. Um, so decomposing our thinking for this month. We went through this in the last few weeks. Ken's been talking about this. I believe this is also transformational from a sort of thinking perspective. This was the sort of the proof that this can actually be done, and it is actually being done by this project in PAE building in Portland. So that's really interesting. So we've been talking really about how the products and the technologies can be decomposed, and we can start to look at things in sort of a new way by doing that. And the last few weeks been I think, very insightful in all of that. And so when we talked about this on our planning call last Wednesday, we were sort of going down the path of, okay, so if breaking things apart and bringing them together in some sort of structured way is a sort of a good way forward from a technology and products perspective, what does that do to the industry itself? Because an industry is made up of players, vendors, channel specifiers, installers, etc., and users. And that is bound to change if the product, the structure of the products and the way the value is actually being created it changes. So this is sort of a depiction of thinking about us going from, let's say, discrete controls and discrete sort of devices that exist really sort of mostly in our past, and they probably will continue to exist in the future. But more and more, they're going to be packaged more like this, which is really more of the picture of what PAE looks like. All of these sort of equipment already have controls in them. They already have smarts in them, so they don't actually need to be controlled as such. Many of them do, not all of them. And it's really sort of composing all of these different things in a different way, right? So we're sitting sort of a change. And Rick comes from Kansas, so he's into the Yellow Brick Road and Wizard of Oz. So that's the theme of AHR. So we thought this would be a sort of a good way of sort of thinking about how to bridge these two worlds. So this is really the topic for the rest of the hour, and I'm going to bring down this graphic and open up the floor for conversation. Who wants to start?
I just want to say we were kind of tied between Yellow Brick Road, which is Kansas, and the Oregon Trail, which is PAE building. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's like there's still opportunity to combine the two.
All roads connect, right?
Yeah, that's right. I love the fact that AI always comes up in its drawings of the uh, the rainbow connection, which I think is also fits in there as well. But anyway, actually, Anto, if I could just open this with a bit of history, is way back when we were inventing DDC, the problem we had is again the equipment all came with some kind of rude control, and it in the early stages, anybody that adopted DDC was actually more of a problem than the people who didn't. And what we actually did is we started buying our equipment without controls. And we basically put our own DDC panels in it. We had an owner that had a strong method of doing this. And so we were fighting this problem way back when, is the fact that they needed some control. And as soon as they put in their control, it was never anything you could get a hold of. And the only way we could get a hold of it was for us to put in their control.
Yeah.
They still got to put in their controls to keep their equipment safe, but we asked them to bring all of that to a terminal strip, and then we would actually put our panels in. So that's what we were doing back in the late 70s and early 80s to try and deal with this. So it's not a new problem. I think that's enough.
Alice, want to chime in on this?
So we've spent 30 years at least trying to address this fundamental issue through protocols, open protocols, LAN and BACnet predominantly. So why, I think it would be good to first summarize why that path has, what are the shortfalls or missing elements of all that effort? Because the equipment manufacturers, to Ken's point earlier, didn't necessarily make their product open at all. But they were then pressured to start, say, adding BACnet to it or LAN to it, or buying a LAN or BACnet product from an OEM and putting that in their product so that stuff became interoperable. But we spend quite a lot of time now suggesting that these protocols, despite the massive effort to get them out and get them adopted, have really not addressed the broader issues that we discuss now. And if not, why not? I think it'd be good to hit on the top 2 or 3 things that are fundamentally inadequate about all that protocol effort that makes us say we've got to rethink the solution here.
I'll take that. I think primarily it's because we had lots of standards, but we had no independent standard testing body to enforce that open connectivity. I mean, I came up in the industry just like a lot of you, and I mean, how often there was a spec that said the system has to be BACnet compatible, and that BACnet compatibility ended up being literally a 6-foot twisted pair cable, the last mile or last few inches to the chiller. That wasn't open connectivity or BACnet enabled, but it checked the box off. Who's going to check to see that there was some sort of like the BACnet, the BACnet testing labs, BTL was a great movement toward that, but who's enforcing that? Because if you just put it in the spec, then as an application engineer, I can easily meet that spec by putting in the 6-foot cable at the last mile inch and say that it's BACnet compatible with no really meaningful interoperability with that system.
Yeah, I think that, go ahead, Tracy.
I figured you'd want to chime in on this one too. So first of all, Lawnmark did testing, interoperability and compatibility testing, and still does to this day at that level. But what you're talking about is a different problem, right? It's specmanship, and there's almost no accounting for the creativity that companies have when it comes to doing stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that really needs to be back in the hands of the commissioning agent or startup engineer or the owner's architect to be able to check to see if if it's, literally meeting the spec or the intent is meant only or what, right? And that is inherently the issue. It's not so much with the protocols themselves.
Yeah, I'd like to build on that. Agree completely, Tracy. So, we established the BACnet testing labs for conformance and interoperability, and we've run that a long way, and we've made a lot of other progress in terms of standardizing metadata and other along the way. The problem is fundamentally business, right? I mean, once you look at a marketplace, how do you provide proprietary added value for vendors to make money? If you take away all of the differentiators where vendors can make money, then you have a purely commodity market. And it is not in the interest of any of the vendors to allow that to happen. So even though we've standardized protocols and we've standardized metadata now, and we've standardized testing of it, we haven't standardized configuration tools or programming languages. We're getting closer to standardizing those, but still not so much. And once those configuration tools are gone, there's really no more ability for manufacturers to add proprietary value. And I think that's why if we keep pushing on that axis, we're not going to get any better because there aren't any degrees of freedom for these folks to make money in their businesses.
Actually, in the chiller example too, is these chiller suppliers, particularly, I think Keith can probably prove me on this, is they do not want to let go of ownership. They actually believe they still own that chiller while it's in your plant. They don't realize that you actually bought it and you paid the $500,000. You can do with it what you want. And some of the fights I had with the major chiller people were unbelievable. And it just trying to get simple control. They don't want you to touch their chiller. They want to have it put out 42-degree water all of its life. Whoops, sorry, back to Fahrenheit. And and then they're going to know your warranty will be null and void if you touch. Have you heard those words?
Well, I think you just slipped. You said their chiller.
Yeah, that's the way they present it.
That's the way, and we have
ownership never changes in a trained chiller. Chiller.
We have many people on this call and listening who were on that side of the table, and we have many people on this call who were charging $1,000 a point. So why don't we have the data now? It's all of our problem, because the $1,000 a point meant, okay, as an engineer, I could instrumentalize the hell out of this building to have all of this data, but then no owner would pay $1,000 a point to make it happen.
I mean, that's a great point, David. And what I would say is the reason we pay $1,000 a point is completely bogus. And the reason it's bogus is not what the cost of each point of control. It's the fact that each point of control has to sustain the entire rest of the job, right? It's always back to procurement. So if we actually procured things where we spent money on things that cost money rather than hiding everything by inflating the price per point, right? I mean, that's the way the industry still works. 100 years later, it's still count up the number of devices you have. It's a hardware sale, and that's where profits are made in this business. All the costs and all the value added is in the data and in these other areas. But because of that procurement, stumbling block, this can't get better.
Well, the procurement stumbling block is also a myth too, in a way, because I've worked with many organizations, especially universities, where I'd be like, we're going to standardize on this Crestron controller or this Lutron controller or whatever the heck. And they're like, no, you have to have a performance spec and 3 similar blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, well, we're putting everything on the IP network. We're going to put in HP switches. No. We're a Cisco house.
Right.
Well, wait, hold it. You have Cisco everywhere? but we can't standardize BMS or lighting control or shade control or AV control. It's bullshit. And so what's interesting though, back to Steve's point though, is it isn't the protocols that cause this problem at all. It's the pricing models and the business models that the industry has been using that's been screwing it up.
Licensing
I
and
totally agree.
territories.
Sorry, thanks, Jim.
Licensing and territories is what I said. I don't know.
Yeah, and so Tracy, I think that's a very valid point to add to this too. And just think if it was $50 a point 30 years ago, what kind of data would we have now? What could we build with AI now if it was $50 a point? Because I tried many times to, put in more instrumentalization and more sensors. And the engineers I worked with, the quote controls engineers, unquote, they would push back and say, no, that's too many points. We can't do that. And I'm like, back to the DDC controller, Ken, that's now controlling a VFD motor, we can get 54 or more points of data out of that automatically, right?
Yeah.
But wait, no, if I want each data point, I have to pay another $1,000. That's insane. Because the controller's putting it out. And then I can't tell you how many projects I've seen where the electrical engineer puts a smart breaker on the feed to the VFD motor to understand the energy use of the motor, and the DDC controller has the CT built in to get it, right?
Yeah.
And so nobody's minding the store to realize the client's paying for two sensors. And
But
because
doesn't that just speak to the incompetence of that engineer, David?
Oh, it does. No, I'm not trying to defend any of this. But this is where also the engineers didn't write good enough specs. If they let that loose language of the BACnet that Keith was talking about, that was a crap spec. If it doesn't get what the owner wants, it didn't do its job.
I literally just walked yet another major retailer, not going to name the name, but they have 2,000 stores. They've got a certain vendor's air handling unit on the rooftops, RTUs. And the spec clearly said, and the drawing said that it had to be BACnet compatible. They put a BACnet, a $500 BACnet module on each controller. I mean, you're talking 2,000 buildings times 500. And they didn't even wire it up. They wired it up to the proprietary.
So I think this is,
and I mean, they wired it up to the proprietary, I'm gonna do it again, Linux controller. And I mean, they didn't even go BACnet, even though it was clearly stated in the spec. But the owner, who's the regional energy manager for this retailer, they have no clue. They don't know the difference. And they actually charged them $500 per unit to have the BACnet module put in there, and it wasn't even wired up at all. But it met the spec.
It's a completely wonderful example, Keith, that I will now put into the quiver, so to speak.
You
but
see it all the time.
So, Anto, what was the
my
original question here?
Decomposing and recomposing, which we're all describing the reasons why most mortals are just thoroughly annoyed with our industry, and what we need to do is we need to be kind of looking forward. And I think that what we're trying to do with C4SB is to say, whether it's AI or digital decision making or digitization or whatever, this is the reason why the physical layer protocols need to, and the providers of these different components, they're going to see an end of days in terms of the way that they've done things. because we're going to have different models of saying, here's how you can get to data, here's how you can get to AI, here's how you can get to decision making, here's how you can get the systems included in a different sort of business model and a different kind of technology model. And I mean, that's going to be the AHR theme, is Yellow Brick Road to a different kind of model.
So Rick, I actually think we've done a pretty good job of the deplatforming or what's the word?
Decomposing.
Decomposing. We've been decomposing for the past 15, 20 minutes now, all the issues associated with our industry. So starting to put it back together again, seems to me the key missing piece is commissioning data. We commission the performance of a system. Does it control to a certain temperature? Does it come on and off when it's supposed to? So the functionality of the equipment from a operational standpoint is commissioned. The concept that every system going in should be commissioned from a data perspective, I think is not a concept that I've seen ever written about or specified as a step in the process.
If I could tag in on that, in the Division 25 spec format we did at my last organization, and then as an independent consultant, the Division 25 Section 3 is what we called required outcomes. And the required outcomes would not only meet the performance thing you're talking about, but in the description to achieve that performance, it explains the data exchange that needs to happen in order for the outcome to happen. And so for that required outcome to be signed off on, just to give you an example, the occupancy sensors from the Lutron lighting control shall send an occupancy status every minute,
right, or
if a thing changes, via BACnet over IP, utilizing the room naming convention specified by the architect or zoning specified by the architect. And that digital binary occupied, unoccupied will be sent to the Johnson BMS, and they will take that data and therefore change the temperature preset up or down 3 degrees, depending on the time of year and the recovery time of the system in that zone, blah, 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 blah. And the thing happens, but also in the spec, it specified exactly the data exchange that needed to happen for that outcome.
So we're going to simplify that. We're going to simplify that with what we're doing at the PAE building by being able to say, when that system gets delivered, the data will immediately either be visible to the system or not. And that's part of what the point we're trying to make at PAE is that it kind of becomes almost a plug and play capability of, instead of just writing down what the spec is, you also say, and by the way, here's when that device gets installed and commissioned, the data will be visible in this system like immediately.
I appreciate the concept of simplifying it, but to Keith's point earlier, depending on the scruples of the contractor, they could totally blow that off if it's not exactly specified.
It won't matter if it's specified, because they will be. This is what we did at the fire station in Kansas City a couple of years ago. Also, we said that, by the way, here's the dashboard that your system will need to show up in immediately, not when testing and balancing is happening, not at closeout, not whatever, but upon construction. And so but that's what. Yes, you have to have 25/25 for when you go to court and say it didn't happen. But having a technology that shows how the plug and playness will happen is part of what we're going to show it with PAE.
Yeah. I agree with that, because I've always been a proponent of performance-based specs. I'll give you a great example. LA Community College District. 20 years ago, I wrote the spec for LACCD. It was going to be lawn maker database, and all the performance was around. It wasn't around what was on the wire. RS-485, this many bytes per second. It was Anytime an alarm is enunciated or in the field, it will show up on the primary workstation within 5 seconds. I don't care about the plumbing. I don't care if it's a million 9600 baud, 100 megabits. All I know is that I want the alarm to come in within 5 seconds. So it doesn't matter. And we in this industry, and oh, by the way, I'm not criticizing Linux. It wasn't even Linux's fault. To your point, Rick, it was the unscrupulous contractor, David, it was an unscrupulous contractor that charged the customer $1 million for 2,000 BACnet modules and chose not to use them.
And Keith, I completely agree with that methodology too. I think depending on if you know the contractors and know you have to design the spec to make sure that it will deliver. And Rick, I totally get the dashboard approach too, of, it has to show temperature data or alarm data. It's up to the specifying engineers to do the job to get the results. And this is where I think most of the folks on this call are not on the design and engineering side, but more on the, contracting and operations side. And this is where I think the design engineers need to go to frickin' school to understand this and understand the owner's needs better. So the contract requirements illuminate and necessitate the outcomes better.
I'd like to jump in with a one on the OEM kind of. If you look at this from an OEM's point of view, is every OEM has moved to some kind of digitalization control almost from necessity because they can't control their machines without this technology. And so they have always a subsystem running inside of their product, which actually makes it work and keeps it safe. Now, when you buy that product, do you get access to those points? And typically, have they supported any of those standards? And what I find is that they actually sometimes seem to go out of their way to grab some obscure control system that has no standards, and then they'll charge you to put a BACnet point out. So that's a very frustrating situation as well. And that whole like when you buy the product, do you own the data? Do you own the control of, can you get right inside the head of the chiller? Can you see the CT that is in the chiller? If they've got sensors in the windings of the coil of your chiller in the motor, can you see those, Keith? I'm guessing not. And yet they're there. There's a whole control system that we're isolated from, and when we buy the product, we don't get access to that control system.
Yeah, I can see it because I'm not going to go through the $1,000 point mapped over BACnet exposed point scenario. So I'm going to go right to the controller on the chiller, the meter that's already there, and it's just another interface. So we do that a lot. We bypass the smelly, messy BAS mapping scenario, and we go right to the individual controller, and we get the data there right from the horse's mouth. So I'm fully familiar with that.
And the chiller people love you, right?
Oh yeah, I'm looking out for the black vans all the time.
Love it.
So I want to add something that David
but that's
said
a problem,
earlier.
is this ownership of data is that somehow we have to hit the OEM folks on the nose, and they've got to play the game kind of thing. It's not just about standards, it's about releasing the information.
Come on, let's tag you in.
Yeah, I just want to respond to what you said earlier. I am on the design and engineering side. I'm an architect, right? So I can speak from that. And a pattern that I have seen for many years now, and it got reinforced at some recent conferences I went to. At an AI conference, actually, at Greenbuild, architect gets on stage, says, yes, we use BIM. Yes, we do digital twins. We're not going to release any of it because that's our IP. Basically, they're bundling it all into not wanting to give that information because there's a fear that AI is going to take it and do stuff with it. So they bake it into these PDFs, and it's just infuriating to me because this was an architect from a large firm roundtable. In other words, a large architectural firm that says we are not going to share our information. And they don't get the idea that you can actually split part. You don't have to, it's not an all or nothing. But if you share nothing, then you get nothing, and then you end up with these dumb buildings that don't have anything in them. So
It's
technically they can, the technology is there, but they're not willing to, which is more of a business decision than a technology decision.
and I think you bring up a very good point, Kimon, because this is when it comes to the owner knowing to require that from the design team.
Yes, and checking it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But most of the time, an owner doesn't have an enterprise or exchange information requirements document
Yeah.
that says how BIM's going to be used.
Yeah.
In one of the projects I'm doing now, I went through 3 architecture firms before finding one that would agree to the BIM model being considered as IP a collaborative work
Right.
that's owned by the owner. And the architects and the engineers and all the designers are contributors to that shared IP, but
Right.
they don't own it. The owner owns it because it's a work for hire.
Yeah.
And if you consider your precious design as IP, it's like, well, we're paying you, therefore you can't use the design we paid you for anyplace else.
It's
So you
work
can't do
product.
any more high
It's
rise.
not their IP, it's work product, man. It's you
Right,
produce
exactly.
Right.
it.
Yeah.
I paid for it. I own it, not you.
Yep.
And what
Yeah,
the
I-
owners are doing is they're scraping it off of PDFs. They actually have AI tools to scrape the data off the PDFs to use it for operations
All
or
the
whatever.
time.
And the BIM that David, that you talked about too, our work with the State Department, we said, okay, yeah, you want to get the full BIM, but actually you want to let's just get a list of assets and a CSV, the damn data like we talked about, right? Just give me the assets, give me the attributes that I need, so I can find that air handling unit, so I can connect it to other things. It's simple
And-
stuff that gets missed.
So guys,
too.
the missing principle here is whether the system is a control system or it's a BIM coming out of an engineering firm. Anything that generates data, as a principle, that data should be immediately available when it's turned over to the owner. Period. Okay. How? That's, I'll leave that to you guys, C4SB to help drive the direction of how that data becomes available. But to one of the chat sessions here from Tristan, he was saying, hey, the minute you turn it up, I should be able to see the data. So the OEMs, the chiller manufacturer, I don't care what you produce as a piece of equipment, it's going to have data on it. That's my data. I get to see it. I get to see it immediately. Okay. And so yes, we need mechanisms to make that as easy as possible. But then the related problem, I know you guys can appreciate this, is when you introduce things like middleware, how does middleware companies make money? They charge, or even analytics, they charge often on points. How many points of data do you want to look at? And then their price tag goes up and up and up, right? So then I got to make decisions. Well, I don't necessarily need all the data because I don't want to pay for all the data, right? So we got to wrestle with that little dilemma because it's a huge problem.
So what's so interesting about this is, who remembers Joule X? Does anyone remember Joule X that was purchased by Cisco? And actually in the stack for IP, you have to give your MAC address, you have to give, your IP address, is it DHCP or whatever. There are all of these rules for a device to be on an IP network. And it's astounding for a BMS system. There aren't rules like, if you're going to be on our BMS network, you have to supply all of these data points. And that's just standard operating procedure for the industry. I think if we switch to a data-rich, data-free model where all of this data's, if you want to play with us, you have to expose all this data automatically to whatever control system there is, and you're done. Just like a VFD DDC already does. You just got to make it all available.
So two parts to that. One, there has to be some sort of standard as to where that data is going to be made available to. So where does it show up? And the second is some sort of, so there's that's the carrot. There also has to be a little bit of a stick of like a competitive pressure or legislation would be cool. There's this thing called right to repair legislation that's primarily aimed at electronics and cars and consumer stuff. But it's like one of the things that I've kind of had my eye on relative to, because it insists in the states that are passing this legislation that anybody that sells anything electronic needs to make all that data available to the owner, the purchaser of the equipment. Now, if that was to apply to, it would cover all the things you just described. In manufacturers would have to be aware of the fact that the data and it's called right to repair, but it really says that you have to be able to diagnose and you have to be able to have ownership of the access. You have to be able to access and have ownership to be able to do what you want to do with the systems that you paid money for. So that right to repair concept is sort of giving precedent to the idea that OEMs have to pony up the access.
I think it's true though that a lot of devices just automatically go, here's all of the things that are exposed. The question is on the pickup side. And this is where the $1,000 a point thing still comes in. So this is where the building-wide systems need to default to taking all 54 of those from the VFD, and then the owner then gets to decide, I'll just take this one, but let's put everything else into memory. And well, let me say one more thing. I was working with a pharmaceutical firm on the West Coast, and they had, I'm glad all of you're all sitting down. They had almost 400 megabytes of building data, and they saw it getting up to 2 gigabytes. Why are we keeping this? Because it costs so much to keep the data. Yeah. Everybody's like, when was this? This was a decade ago. So that maybe seemed like a lot of data, but the cost of memory is so low now, and the cost for backing up that memory is so low, there's no reason not to take all the data and use it and store it forever until, why not? So that's the pendulum to the other side.
So in the remaining 5 few minutes that we have, I think we've discussed all of these things that sort of needs to change and the sort of the obviousness. But the question is, what's actually going to change in the HVAC industry? What is likely to change, and how do we see that happening?
My hope is massive disruption.
Okay, you're from outside of the HVAC industry, so that makes total sense. What do you think, Steve? How is it actually going to change? Because you're sort of, as a vendor, and you've worked with other vendors, so you know how it works, how the industry works.
I think
maybe it's down to that commoditization that Jim was saying.
Yeah, I think what we mentioned earlier when we were decomposing is the fundamental. So often the owners just don't know what they're buying, and so they don't even know what to ask for. So where's the intelligent buyer, if you will, going to be coming from? Is it going to be GSA, or can we maybe have ASHRAE show some leadership in this area, since they at least are a very recognized institution. But I think if we don't have some kind of heavyweight, whether it's a large retailer like Walmart or an ASHRAE or a government, saying this is how you have to play, this is the new sandbox. You want to play, this is how it's going to work. You have data,
So
you have every bit of it at the time you sell this equipment.
So you're saying that the industry is not going to change voluntarily. There has to be a forcing action.
I agree to a certain degree with that, but I think there's another force at work that's going to make this all happen, whether we want it to or not. And that is just like everything in our history. If you look at the predecessor on the consumer side of the market, the equivalent, we eventually end up following what happens in consumer world. Right now, there is building pressure from owners, at least I'll speak in my space, who have smart thermostats at their house. I can get all the data right here on my phone. I don't understand why I pay, 100 times more for my HVAC system on my building, and you can't give me a simple app that lets me look at my temperatures and change my set points and stuff. I mean, that pressure of what you can do in the consumer world in the amount of open, interoperable connectivity that's happening in the consumer world now with Matter and other things like that, it is it is going to wash over into our industry. I have no doubt about it.
I'd also like to say that I think it's unfair to say that there hasn't been any change. There's a huge amount of change that's been going on in our industry. It just happened slowly. And if you wind back the clock, you can understand that almost all of the big players are closing down branch offices and getting out of the systems business, getting into purely products business. One of the reasons that's true is they understand that these discontinuities are coming. They've been preparing for them for a long time, and they're basically pushing that system integration work and this engineering work down to smaller independents. The reason they're doing that is they understand that it's going to be very difficult to make money in these commodity market spaces. So they're retreating to commodity areas that they think they can continue to defend, and letting those large system integration portions of their business where they had service and systems integration work, they're letting those atrophy or spinning them off to their channels. And so that trend is going to continue. And I think it's very important that we stop thinking about the industry as how it used to look with large monolithic players. We're well down the degradation of that organization of this market space. We're halfway through it. And basically everybody knows it now, and that repositioning will give us a new opportunity here.
Yeah,
So
I totally agree with that.
the commoditization is happening.
Correct.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
And everybody that's driving one of these big companies or even the mid-sized ones, everybody knows it and they're following it. And it's not that the business will go away, but it will be reconfigured.
They're
And in
gonna
that
have-
reconfiguration, we can rise up and solve some of these problems.
Yeah. They're going to have to change. I agree with Tracy and you, Jim, that the nimble, innovative, and also customer companies, upstarts that treat the customer right, are fair, don't gouge them, ethical, and all that good stuff, right? I remember I was having lunch with Kenny, one of our customers, and several HVAC contractors who shall remain nameless. They were at bidding on one of the buildings, and one of them, and I think at one point Ken said something like, all you guys suck. You all suck. And one of them literally said, you know what? That's true, but we aim to suck less. And that never, that was it right there. Like he admitted it, because we aim to suck less, what I mean? So they're reckoning, their day of reckoning is coming, because customers are going to figure out who treats them right and who's honest and fair and has integrity.
So talking about the recomposing the industry, I think that is the mic drop moment, and I don't think we can do any better than that. So we should wrap.
I think, though, there's going to be a contrary movement to C4SB called 1KAP, which is $1,000 a point. 1KAP will be the enemy organization.
That's the arch
fighting
enemy
against C4SB. Yes,
that's the wicked witch
black
of the web.
hats of the industry.
Wow,
hold it. We can't do Wicked Witch. If you were forced to see Wicked for Good over the weekend with your granddaughter, you would know that it was the dark which that actually had the magic, and Glenda doesn't have game at all.
All right.
With that.
With that, let us wrap this, and we will be back next Monday for the last time this year before we break up for the rest of the year. So I hope you all have a great week this week, and see you next Monday. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Take care.